Okay, so game 2 of the Major League Baseball London series for 2023 between the Cubs and the Cardinals. The Cardinals have had a reversal of fortunes. They got battered in the first game 9-1. They win the second game 7-5 against the Cubs. Although early on it was looking like they were going to face another blowout, being 4-0 down after the first inning. But they stuck in there and they ground out a 7-5 win. I will say this though, 11 different pitches used by both sides, which I don't know if that's normal or not, but 11 pitching changes. I think that might have slightly impacted the flow of the game. Both starting pitchers were withdrawn quite early on. Stroman for the Cubs looks like he's got a hand injury. Liberatore was basically getting blown out very, very early on. The Cubs got under him and figured him out quite quickly. Jordan Hicks, who finished for the Cardinals pitching, was pitching at over 100 miles an hour though, so that was kind of scary, considering the heat and humidity. And when you're facing 100-mile-an-hour curveballs, that's kind of scary. All in all, I felt the fact it was a closer game made it a bit more entertaining, even with the lack of home runs. Not a single home run was scored, which is a shame. We had 3 home runs yesterday. I do think the weather, the heat, the humidity has had a massive impact on both games. I think yesterday, as an evening start, roughly this time as I'm recording this video, actually, it was an evening start. I think that might have helped slightly with the temperature slightly cooling off, but still very, very humid. Early daytime start, maybe the Cardinals clearly have adapted better to that. They've responded to the defeat. The Cubs have obviously rested on their victory a little bit too much and haven't kicked on with a similar dominant performance. Although early on it was looking likely that, hey, we're going to have another dominant Cubs win. Wasn't to be the case. Stroman obviously lost his way a little bit with some of his pitching, and then leaves with that hand injury. Then the quite regular pitching lineup changes for both sides, which I think does actually impact the flow sometimes a little bit. I don't know how many pitching changes you're allowed in a Major League Baseball game, but quite a lot of pitching changes. In saying that, I think there were some misfields by both sides early on, which led to the 4-all tie after the third. There were some misfields, which were entertaining. But overall, not a bad game, not the best game. But because it was closer than yesterday, a little bit more tension. I think the fans were a little bit more involved, and more fans stayed towards the end. There were less fans heading to the exits early, which I think was a good sign. In saying that, and I'm going to leave it here. So the game itself, not the worst game I've seen. I've watched a fair few baseball games, but not the best. The lack of home runs, I think, was a bit disappointing. I think the heat and humidity has had an impact on the pitchers, the outfielders, and the batters as well. With that lack of breeze, with it being an all-enclosed stadium, I think that has had an impact. I will say this. One thing that Major League Baseball needs to improve on is ticketing price, because I've seen a massive variation in price of tickets. The cheapest tickets I've seen going, and I did my research for this, was around £50-55, which is I think around $60-65, depending on the exchange rate. So not overly expensive, which is good. However, I've seen differing reports on the top end ticket price. Looking at about £350 for the top end, which was very similar to 4 years ago. But I have seen on some resale sites, legitimate resale sites like StubHub and Ticketmaster, nearly £1,000 for some tickets. That is ridiculous. As I said 4 years ago, they needed to look at getting the ticketing price right. Obviously, things have changed economically in the last 4 years, and there were empty seats again that were noticeable, as well as yesterday. Although more fans did stay till the final pitch of the game. Ticket price, I mean, crikey. When your top end tickets are from first up sale are £300-350, okay, that is a little bit steep for some people, but pretty much in line with where they were 4 years ago, maybe a little bit cheaper, but nearly £1,000 or $1,000 for a ticket on a resale site. Legitimate second-party reseller or third-party reseller, shall I say, like StubHub or Ticketmaster. That is ridiculous. The start times, one evening game, one daytime game. I think you may maybe possibly bring forward the evening game start time by an hour or two. You might have fans staying towards the end of the game rather than leaving early. In saying that, I think crowd numbers were decent. It'll be interesting to see how many of them were actually local fans and how many were overseas fans. Like last year, or 4 years ago, should I say, 30% were from overseas or non-resident, I think, non-local. So it'll be interesting to look at a percentage of locals. So that's UK nationals and UK residents versus overseas nationals and residents who've flown in just for the game. But that ticket price, I think, is something that Major League Baseball seriously needs to get right still. There's still too much variation between the cheaper end tickets, which will sell out almost immediately, and the top end tickets that people are just going to not pay for. Probably why some went to resale for such high prices, and people just weren't buying them. Hence why there were some vacant seats. I still think it's been a decent start. I think having it on the BBC website is a start. It would be nice to see it on free to air coverage on the mainstream TV. I think that's a bit of an annoying one. The fact that BT Sport, we don't know what's going to happen long term with BT Sport being rebranded for next year, and I will do a video about next year's dates and teams. What's going to happen with the ongoing subscription TV rights, but it would have been nice to see it actually on mainstream TV rather than on a website, because then you're relying on internet feed, and my internet feed yesterday and today, if you have a dodgy internet connection or there's a disruption with the feed, you lose it. So some things that I think Major League Baseball needs to get better. But it was also good to see a lot of other teams represented in the crowd with fans wearing other teams' apparel rather than just the Cardinals and the Cubs. That was kind of good to see. So it does show that there is a fan base here. And there's a dedicated fan base here, but it'll be interesting to see what the viewership figures are like, what the percentage of fans in attendance were locals is like. Is it improved from 4 years ago? Another thing I noticed, scoring is down in the last 4 years. So 4 years ago they had over 50 runs. We had half that. We had 22 runs in total. So scoring is down by half. So that's interesting. And that lack of home runs as well. Maybe the weather conditions had something to do with it. We are suffering a little bit of a mini heat wave at the moment in this part of the world. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on the game or both games below. Please leave a like and subscribe. And I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.